Hello, welcome once again to Stuff and Things, where I like to talk about stuff and occasionally even things. I'm your good friend Bradley, and today is a very pleasant and rather hot Sunday Stuff and Things. And on this pleasant and hot Sunday Stuff and Things, we have stuff and things to talk about, including upcoming videos, things that you can look forward to on Stuff and Things and Stuff and Things Plays. We're going to be getting into GLP's Quiet Nights Revisited, Captain Black Cherry, other videos on Stuff and Things Plays. Then, the topic of the show is a question from our good friend Roger Stray Dog, asking me about my top 5 books. And this was kind of a difficult question for me, but we're going to delve into that a little bit. We've been talking about books the past few weeks or the past couple months on the channel, so we'll be getting into that. And then we have your questions, comments, and feedback in hashtag #AskStuffAndThings. So let's get into it. All right, so what can you look forward to on Stuff and Things Plays? This coming week, we have the revisited episode for, where's the logo? GLP's Quiet Nights. This was a blend I reviewed many years ago, one that I liked quite a bit, but not as much as I thought I remembered liking it, at least in the initial review. And the revisited episode is a really good way for me, or the revisited series is a really good way for me to kind of reassess blends, things that I may not have thought about for a long time, go back, check them out again, and see if my opinion still matches what I had said in my initial review. And this is one of those where it didn't match up as well as some of them do. Obviously, our tastes change throughout the years. We have more experience. We experience different blends and different things. And I have to say, Quiet Nights was better the second time, or at least, I don't know if it's the second time, I think I've had more than a couple tins of this, but better than the initial review. So check out the first impressions video for Quiet Nights. Then, kind of a fun video, and I hope you guys will watch this. I know it's not our typical subject matter on Stuff and Things, but I use Adobe Photoshop a lot. I do thumbnails for all the videos, I do photo editing for just the photography I do as a side hobby, and recently I noticed that there is a new feature in Adobe Photoshop. They have new filters, neural filters, that are supposed to use AI and like a neural network to do smart filtering of your photos. And I did a little survey of the different filters they have to offer, and some of the results were interesting. Let's just say that. Perhaps the quality was not as good as I expected from Adobe. So I'm going to be doing that video not this week, but the week after. And then after that, I heard your feedback, you declared your preference, and I'm going to do the full treatment for Captain Black Cherry. I'm going to do a first impressions video. I'm going to treat it just like any other blend, and then I'm going to do a full review after that. So we have GLP's Quiet Nights, then we have the Adobe Photoshop neural filters, and then we have first impressions for Captain Black Cherry. On Stuff and Things Plays, the Elden Ring series is continuing and getting close to drawing to an end. Now, many of you will know that a very big game was just released called The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Everybody's talking about it, everybody's playing it. I had it pre-ordered on Amazon and then saw that the pre-order wasn't going to come on time. So I ended up canceling that pre-order and picking it up locally at a shop. Now I realize that I might not even have time to play it before the pre-order would have come anyway, but regardless, I have the game in hand. I have not played it yet. I had initially decided that I was going to have maybe a month buffer between the game coming out and then me posting episodes on the channel, because I'm about 6 weeks ahead of Stuff and Things Plays as far as videos that I've recorded. So I finished up Elden Ring, and then I have a short series on Minecraft. They're in the can, they're ready to go. And I didn't want to try to intersperse Tears of the Kingdom episodes in between those episodes. I'm vacillating now. I haven't decided for sure. I know that many of you who watch this also watch my Stuff and Things Plays content. I don't know, just from a time/bandwidth kind of standpoint, whether or not I could get episodes out for Tears of the Kingdom and have them ready by next week. but stay tuned. I may try. I haven't totally decided yet, and you guys can let me know in the comments below, but it would be nice to get in when everybody's really excited about the game. But I've also just entered into a very busy period at work, and it might be tough. But anyway, stay tuned. If not, we'll do Elden Ring, Minecraft, and then Tears of the Kingdom, or we may intersperse Tears of the Kingdom episodes in amongst all of those. So stay tuned. All right, next, we have a comment or a question from our good friend, Roger Stray Dog. This comes via YouTube, and Roger says, so what 5 or so books have you enjoyed the most and you think every person should read? Have there been any books that have drastically changed your direction of thinking or profoundly shook your life? It's a good question, Roger. Thank you very much. I've stated many times in the past on this show that I have trouble coming up with top 5 lists or top 10 lists. I usually avoid doing it. It's very difficult for me to say, oh, these are the top 5 things in any given category. But I decided to try to tackle this question. Before I get into the books I selected, I will say that these aren't necessarily my top 5 favorite books or the books that I consider the best books of all time. They're just the ones that occurred to me when the question was asked. I will also say that the second part of his question, books that have drastically changed your direction of thinking or profoundly shook your life, I can think of some books like that, but those books are not on this list that I have compiled today. In particular, when I was a young man in early high school, I read The Catcher in the Rye. And like many adolescent kids, I think, adolescent boys probably who have read that book, I thought it was amazing. And I really related to Holden Caulfield and the Phonies. I still think that's a great book, but I don't think that I would rate it as highly now as I did when I was 15. That's nothing against the book. I think that's what the book was for. It was for that audience. Other books I can think of, like The Myth of Sisyphus by Camus. When I was in college, like probably 19 years old, I read that and was like, yes, this is exactly what I believe. It's basically a philosophical essay. And now I have evolved, I've changed throughout the years. I still think it's a good book, but it doesn't have the same kind of sway over my opinions on philosophy and the meaning of life as it did when I was 20. So those books did affect me greatly at the time, but and that all goes into you, into your background, into the things that makes you, into the things that have made you what you are now. But I can't think of anything that is like, this has changed my life and I'm still living my life because of the way this changed my life, if that makes any sense. But anyway, enough preamble here. I have selected 5 books. Now again, these aren't necessarily books that I consider the best books I've ever read, but they're just the books that I really enjoy and I've gotten a lot out of. So I think I will start with something that you've heard me talk about many times before, and that is Shadow and Claw by Gene Wolfe. Now this is actually kind of cheating because I'm going to use the entire series, The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, and Shadow and Claw, it's Shadow of the Lictor and Claw of the Conciliator, are the 2 first books in that series. It is a tetralogy, and then there's a coda called The Earth of the New Sun. So it's basically like a 5-book series, if you want to think of it that way. And it is one of the best science fiction series I have ever read in my entire life. It is very, very well written. The prose is amazing. The central character is fascinating. The narration is amazing. It has that whole unreliable narrator thing that I enjoy a lot of the times. The world building is fantastic. It's kind of in the Jack Vance Dying Earth sort of vein, where it's a future Earth so far in the future that technology that had once been commonplace is now considered almost magical, and things have, I mean, there's just been so many eons of history, it's almost impossible to conceive of the world that they're living in. But you get little glimpses and little hints that things from our world have almost carried through it. I mean, because you get little hints that it's still a continuation of our history or our future. It's just a fascinating series, amazingly well done, very literary. It's not pulp sci-fi in any way. So I highly recommend The Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. And typically now, if you want to buy this series, you have to get them in 2-book volumes. So the first volume is Shadow and Claw. Next, a book that I have enjoyed tremendously through the years, and I reread it every now and again. I think one of my favorite authors just for pure prose and almost a documentarian style of writing is George Orwell, and I love his book, Down and Out in Paris and London. Obviously, 1984 is the book that everyone knows about with George Orwell, but this book is so good and so fascinating. It basically recounts autobiographically his experiences working in a horrible little bistro in Paris and trying to survive. They go through the whole process of trying to open this bistro. First, he's working at this giant hotel in the kitchen. Just fascinating characters, really interesting documentarian details or details of the life, at the time. When did this take place? I think it's supposed to be like the 20s maybe in Paris. I think it's like the late 20s, maybe early 30s is when this takes place. And then after his sojourn in Paris, he goes back to London. And basically he has a job lined up and a place to stay lined up, but he doesn't have it yet. And so he spends several weeks as a tramp, a homeless person. The old-fashioned word tramp, I believe, is what they use, or what he uses in Down and Out in Paris and London. And basically he experiences the life of a wanderer wandering around in the UK, and it's really fascinating as well, just showing how social services dealt with people who were homeless. Different rules, like you couldn't be in the same place for very long, going into soup kitchens and things. It's fascinating. A fantastic book, Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell. Someone is weed eating outside, but we just have to continue. Next, again, this is kind of a whole series, so I don't know that you think that's breaking the rules or not, I'm not sure, but it is the Aubrey Maturin series by Patrick O'Brian. The first book in that series is Master and Commander. Now there is a film called Master and Commander starring Russell Crowe that isn't really the story of this book. It takes aspects from this story, but then it combines it with stories from other books in the Aubrey Maturin series. This is the first novel. If you like historical fiction, if you are interested at all in the Napoleonic era, in the age of sail, this is a fascinating read. Again, it is super, super literary, amazing prose. The two main characters, Captain Aubrey and then his good friend, Dr. Stephen Maturin, are fantastic. The way their friendship and relationship is portrayed is amazing. It's just, there's action, there's adventure, but it's more a character study of these two men, and they're very different men. And it is so amazingly evocative of the time period. The way he describes life on board these gigantic sailing vessels, or actually they weren't even that gigantic, but these amazing sailing vessels in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and just the material culture of that time. The vocabulary is very reminiscent of that time. I don't know how accurate it is. Oh my Lord, with the weed eating. Gotta carry on. I don't know how accurate it is, but it seems really accurate. It's just so good, so evocative. Absolutely love it. The Aubrey Maturin series by Patrick O'Brian. I almost used a different name, an author who wrote the Hornblower series, but that's a whole different series. This is Patrick O'Brian, Aubrey Maturin series, first book, Master and Commander. Highly recommend it. Next, I really like Cormac McCarthy. I think he is a fantastic novelist. I think he's one of the best living writers. I have liked many of his books, but if I had to choose one, I think it's No Country for Old Men. The movie is amazing as well, the Coen brothers film, but it's almost kind of a toss-up as to which is better, the film or the book. But the book goes into things with more depth. Again, I love his style of prose. It's kind of spare, it's very stark, but it's very evocative and very effective. And I just think the story is so interesting. It's more myth than like a crime novel. It has sort of the aspects of a fable or something. It seems larger than the people who make up the story. I don't know, it's very, very good. Amazingly well written. I'm sorry, the noises outside are really getting to me a little bit, gang, but for sure check out No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy if you have not read it yet. And finally, this kind of surprised me because this is a book that I've only read once and I read it very recently, but I'm gonna pick The Odyssey of Homer by, well, translation by Richmond Lattimore. I loved this. I enjoyed this book so much. And I can't think of, I'm trying to think of the last fiction book or last narrative book that I read that I enjoyed as much as The Odyssey. I'm sorry, gang. I don't know how loud that is for you. It's very loud for me, and it makes it difficult for me to concentrate on what I'm trying to say, but this is real life. This is what happens. I have a limited amount of time to record this episode, and I just have to carry on. It seems to have stopped for the time being. Now it has restarted, but it's at a slightly greater distance. So we will continue. The Odyssey, it's fantastic. I am a sucker for ancient history. I'm absolutely fascinated by ancient societies and I really want to understand what life was like day to day in ancient societies. And as much as I enjoyed the Iliad, the Odyssey has so much more of that, kind of the day-to-day life, the material culture, explanations of cooking, of carpentry, of all these things that the questions that I ask. You can give me the outlines of this story and the plot points, and that's fascinating, and it's really good as well in this book. But the things that really draw me in are all the little details, talking about how they prepare a carcass, they slaughter a pig, how Odysseus made his bed. All these different little details that I just find fascinating, and I don't know, and I would love to know, how many of those details were from the time that this was compiled, circa 800 BC, how many were actual memories of the time this is supposed to portray, around 1200 BC. These are the questions that I get fascinated by, and that's why I love reading things like this. And this is the prototype epic. This is kind of what everything else is based on in Western literature. So if you haven't read Homer's Odyssey, I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend the Richmond Lattimore translation. So like I said, not necessarily the best books in my opinion, but these were the books that came to mind when that question was asked. And so I think that's a good way of answering the question. It's kind of like a Rorschach test. Best books, and these are the ones that kind of came to mind right off the bat. I think if I thought about it more, I might pick some different ones, perhaps, but I think that's plenty to be going on with for now. Check them out, please. You won't be disappointed. All right, gang, but now it is time for hashtag Ask Stuff and Things. Remember, if you have a question for me and you would like it answered on the Sunday Stuff and Things, tweet at SAT Bradley with the hashtag Ask Stuff and Things. You can also send me questions via Patreon. If you are a Patreon supporter, you will go to the front of the line. You can also leave me super thanks. There is a button, a thanks button under this video. If you do that, you'll go to the front of the line, or you can just leave questions, comments, and feedback on my YouTube videos. I read through every single one, and I pick out questions every single week. So first, via Patreon, we have a question from Corbin Bordner. Corbin says, and thank you for being a Patreon supporter, Corbin, have you ever had Star of the East flake mold on you? I've had it twice, and every time it's molded in the jar. I thought this was interesting because in all my years, I have never had any blend mold on me. And typically, if I open a tin, I usually finish the tin. But I do have plenty of tins. I've got, I don't know, probably 24 mason jars with various blends inside of them. And they're sealed, you know, just as, or not a mason jar, a canning jar. There's a rubber seal. Get a little vacuum there, or it creates a little vacuum as you seal it. And I have not had a single one of them ever mold on me. So I'm wondering, you know, most blends have some sort of antifungal agent applied to them. And then also, you know, the humidity, it's never usually so much that it would mold just if left to its own devices. So I'm really curious about that. I'm wondering if any of you have had that experience. I cannot speak from personal experience with this. As I said, I've never had a single blend mold. I'm just wondering if maybe it was really moist. Was it really humid when you jarred it up? Was there moisture in the jar before you sealed it? Fascinating. Next, we have some feedback from last week's Sunday Stuff and Things. This is from Megaton Settler. Is that a Fallout 3 reference? They say, I enjoyed CB Black. I enjoyed CB back, so Captain Black back in the day as a simple filler, a quick breakfast coffee break pipe. The Odyssey is possibly the greatest fiction book of all time. I think you might be right there, buddy. A great contender to be the biggest influence for all fiction writers. Loved the pacing. It, to me, was more literary fiction than just plain fiction. Also, please play Fallout 3. Okay, yeah, that was a Fallout 3 reference. A super slept on and underrated game. Thank you, Megaton Settler, and I have played Fallout 3. I played it right when it came out initially, so I probably wouldn't play it on the channel because I've already played it, but yeah, I really enjoyed it at the time. Next, from Greg Murdoch. It's terrible. There are only a few teas I think are so disgusting they should be outlawed. Captain Black Cherry is one of them. Smoking Buckles Cherry? I think would be more enjoyable. I've never heard of Buckles Cherry. Let me know what it is in the comments below. Next, Cheesy Bacon. I'm going to go against the grain here and state that I would most definitely find great amusement in watching you S Captain Black Cherry in a Dunhill or a Costello. After all, if you're going to give it the same respect as any other blend that you review, does it not deserve to be evaluated from those same pipes as well? That is a point. That is a point, Cheesy Bacon. And I just was talking about how I don't really think ghosting is that big of an issue, but of course, bear in mind that I'm talking about the kinds of blends that I S. I don't go for super gloopy aromatic blends, and so if you're just dealing with English blends and vapors and things like that, ghosting isn't really an issue in my opinion. But if I were to throw the Captain into one of my pipes, one of my Dunhills from the 60s, or one of my Costellos, oh God, I can smell it through the package. Can I put my money where my mouth is? I don't know. We'll bear that in mind. Hey, next, from Fretterator. CB Cherry was the first blend I'd ever had. I think that is the case for a lot of people. That was about 4 years ago. It is still the only aromatic that I actually enjoy. Interesting. Next, from Paul Rouleau. My father used to S cherry tea after a long day at work as he relaxed in his easy chair. I loved that aroma. It may have been Captain Black, probably a good chance. Though I cannot recall, I enjoy some occasionally, remembering happier times. Yeah, and I think a lot of people have those nostalgic feelings for Captain Black or Captain Black Cherry because so many people back in the day S'd these blends. Like I mentioned, one of the first people I ever came across who smoked a pipe was my best friend's dad, and this is what he had. And that aroma is very, very evocative to me. Interesting. Next, from Glenn Moon. Hey Bradley, my first comment to one of your videos. Welcome. I just found you about a month ago. Funny to me finding someone so close. I'm over in Concrete. Concrete is a town in Washington. That is pretty close. Captain Black Cherry was the first pipe tea I ever had about 23 years ago. It's funny because people are using the euphemism tea now. And so it's throwing me off, and it shouldn't be throwing me off. I ever had about 23 years ago. I S'd it for about a year and found I just didn't have the patience for the pipe and gave it up until last year, at which Captain Black was the first thing I picked up. 1 bag cherry, 1 bag gold. Through YouTube, I found a wide variety of pipe tea that I've come to love, and while I still have a lot of aromatics in my rotation, mixed with several vapors and straight Virginias, Captain Cherry isn't one of them, though the gold and cherry do live in my work pipe bag just for the emergency situation. It's not horrible, just not amazing either, in my opinion. On a side note, yes, there have been a lot of people talking a lot of trash about my love for aromatics. I think the best we can hope for, if I do a just purely straight first impressions and review of this blend, is if I echo what you said. Not terrible, or no, you said not horrible, just not amazing either. I think that's maybe the best we can work for, but we'll see. Okay, next we have feedback for how to clean and condition your cowboy boots. I posted a video that you should watch about how to clean and condition leather boots. It works for cowboy boots or any casual boots. And David Minderman said, "Hey Brad, could you tell me what happens when you over-condition your boots? Those boots kick ass. I've got some nice Italians myself. No way to pull off a cowboy boot in Germany, I think." Yeah, I don't have any personal experience of Germany, but I can imagine that most Europeans would sneer at another European wearing cowboy boots. I just get that impression. I don't know if maybe that's being unfair. I think I could go to Europe and wear cowboy boots, and if somebody mentioned it, I'd say, hey, I'm American. I'm allowed to wear cowboy boots, but I don't know. Who knows? But yes, if you over-condition leather, you run the risk of it actually rotting. You can impregnate it with so much conditioner, oil, whatever you're using, that it becomes oversaturated. And there's a nice balance. You want it to be, my camera stopped recording. Have I been going for half an hour? That seems crazy. Anyway, we were talking about over-moisturizing or over-conditioning boots. You just want to balance, you want a nice balance between too dry, too moist. Put it right there in the middle. And like I said in the video, I do it whenever I think it looks like it needs it. I don't have any set schedule. But yeah, if you over-moisturize or over-condition your leather, it could potentially rot. Next, we have feedback from, I lost my place because my camera turned off. Blake's Pipes, aka Loy. I know you didn't ask, but I'm a vegetarian. But when I was running marathons, I would buy a pair of cowboy boots, each one I finished. You didn't wear them in the marathons, did you? Thinking something had to die for my effort. And was a vegetarian when I was a butcher's apprentice when I was younger. Cooked meat for every party I had and woman that I was married or dated to. Or woman to whom I was married or dated. Then got older, and hopefully you weren't dating while you were married. Then got older and bought leather to protect myself while riding my motorcycles. Okay, anyway, with much research, found a product called Leather Honey. I've heard of Leather Honey. Leather conditioner and cleaner. Expensive, but the best I have found and used. Just my 2 cents. I believe that I am a vegetarian, and that works for me, but it's not for everyone. If stuff hits the fan, I will eat anything with muscles. Yes, even you. I don't think I would taste very well. You're not going to get any marbling of fat in here. It's going to be very stringy and lean. All right, gang, thank you very much for that feedback. Please keep it coming in. It helps make the show go. But now it is time for the very best part of the show, and that is where we thank our Patreon supporters. Remember, if you would like to support the channels on Patreon, there is a link in the description box below, and it is much appreciated. Helps pay for the fancy camera recording this video, the lights that are shining upon me. And every week, we like to shout out those who support the channels at $25 or more a month. People like Kirk Crompton, Glenn Dunnington, Jason Buckner, MD of the North, David Gaudreau, Nick Papagiorgio, and Finn O'Hagan. And of course, the maniacs, the crazy people who support the channels at $100 a month. People like Bob McGee. And we will never forget our good friend and dearly departed Hall of Fame member, Peter Straub. If you like what you see, if you enjoy following the channel, watching the videos, it really helps out if you want to support us on Patreon. Thank you. But now, gang, that is it. Please stay tuned for what order is everything coming in? GLP's Quiet Nights Revisited. Then, the ridiculous Adobe Photoshop neural filters. You got to see these to believe them. Then, Captain Black First Impressions video. Following up, that will be a full review eventually. And of course, Elden Ring, soon getting into Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, but I can't tell you exactly when yet. But that's it. So until next time, until we meet again, I've been your good friend Bradley. You've been the audience. Oh, and happy Mother's Day, mothers. This has been Stuff and Things on a very pleasant Sunday Stuff and Things. I'll see you later.